All right, let's talk about a situation that's just so confusing and, frankly, painful. You've got someone close to you who's in recovery, and that should be amazing, right? But somehow, their recovery journey has turned into a brand new rulebook for your life. Today, we're going to dig into exactly why that happens.
I mean, this is the core question, isn't it? They're the one who had the struggle. But all of a sudden, your glass of wine with dinner is treated like some kind of personal attack. You're just trying to be supportive, but you walk away feeling controlled, totally confused, maybe even a little resentful. So what's really going on here?
Okay, here is the absolute key to understanding all of this. What we're going to see is that when someone with strong narcissistic tendencies gets into recovery, their demands, they're usually not about healing at all. It's all about getting back control.
All right, let's dive into what we're calling the recovery playbook. We're going to pull back the curtain and look at the real psychological motivations driving this. Once you get what's really going on, everything starts to make a lot more sense.
So this breaks down the strategy perfectly. First up, externalizing blame. This is classic. Their problem managing their own triggers suddenly becomes your fault. You're the one being insensitive or disrespectful. Next, they grab the moral high ground. They're not just sober anymore. Oh no. They're now the world's leading authority on sobriety, and they're judging anyone who doesn't follow their lead. And finally, it's about controlling the entire environment. See, they feel powerless inside, so forcing everyone else to change is a way to get that feeling of dominance back.
But what about when they don't freak out? When they seem okay with you drinking? Well, there are usually two things going on here. Scenario one, they play the victim. They'll sit there all quiet and miserable, making sure you feel a mountain of guilt with every sip. Or, scenario two, they use it to prove they're stronger than you. See how they can resist while you're so weak? Either way you slice it, it is not genuine acceptance.
And this chart, wow, it just makes the difference so clear. It's night and day, really. In a healthy recovery, it's all about personal responsibility. The person says, it's my job to handle my triggers. But in a narcissistic recovery, it's all, you're being disrespectful to me. See the shift? Healthy boundaries are about asking for what you need or maybe stepping away. Narcissistic boundaries are ultimatums. They're demands that you have to change. The entire focus is different. One is about healing yourself. The other is about controlling everyone else.
And this whole process, this core mechanism, actually has a name. It's called externalization. It's basically a defense mechanism. Instead of looking inward and owning your own struggle, you project it out onto someone else. So, I have a real problem with my own self-control gets twisted into, you are creating a problem for me. It's a really powerful way to dodge any kind of shame or personal accountability.
Now, you might think this is some new, modern psychological thing, but it's not. This pattern is as old as time. It's a universal human story. And to prove it, we're going to jump back to an ancient Greek myth that just perfectly nails this whole impulse. And that brings us to the myth of the Procrustean bed. So the story goes there was this guy, Procrustes, an innkeeper, and when guests would stay, he'd make them lie on his iron bed. If they were too short, he'd stretch them out on a rack, and if they were too tall, well, he'd chop off their legs to make them fit. It's a brutal but perfect metaphor, right? It's for anyone who takes their own personal size, their own rule, and demands that absolutely everyone else be forced to fit it. So, with that idea in mind, let's look at a massive historical case study, St. Augustine. This is where we see this exact same pattern, this Procrustean bed idea, play out on a global, world-changing scale. We're talking about a personal struggle that gets turned into a doctrine for all of humanity.
I mean, Augustine's story just fits our playbook to a T. Step one, the personal compulsion. He talks about his own private battle, what he calls his slavery to lust. But then comes step two, he externalizes that shame. Instead of just saying, wow, I have a problem, he concludes that all of humanity is fundamentally broken. And that leads to step three, universalizing the rule. His personal failure to control his own urges gets codified into the doctrine of original sin, this idea that every single one of us is born flawed.
And this is such a key insight. He essentially traded one addiction for another. He didn't just stop the behavior, he pivoted. He swapped the high he got from the bedroom for the high he got from the pulpit, that feeling of ideological purity and moral superiority. He became an absolute zealot for his new set of rules, which is such a classic move for a narcissist in recovery. So how did he justify this massive shift? Well, he pulled off a neat little psychological trick. He split himself in two. Look, the accountable way to see it is to say, I struggled to manage my impulses. The responsibility is internal. But Augustine, he externalized it. He said, my flesh betrayed my spirit. See what he did there? He's no longer a guy who lacks self-control. He's now a noble victim fighting against his own body. And poof, just like that, all personal responsibility is gone.
And this lack of accountability had devastating real-world consequences for people. This story, it's just heartbreaking. Augustine lived with a partner for 15 years. They had a son together. But when a more strategic marriage came along, he just dismissed her, sent her away. And in his famous writings, he goes on and on about how painful the loss was for him. But you know what he never does? He never even writes down her name. She was just an object, a tool to be used and then discarded when she was no longer useful.
So when you map it all out like this, the parallels are they're impossible to ignore. The grandiosity, believing his personal struggle was the template for all of humanity. The lack of accountability, blaming the flesh or original sin instead of his own choices. The interpersonal exploitation, you just have to look at how he treated the mother of his son. His theology in many ways became this massive, brilliant, world-shaping defense mechanism for his own issues.
Okay, so what do we do with all this? Let's bring it back to today. We need to learn how to spot this truth trap, this move that takes one person's private war with themselves and turns it into a universal law that the rest of us are forced to live by.
And this, right here, is the absolute heart of it. They take their own internal conflict and they project it onto the entire human race. It's never enough for them to just deal with their own stuff. No, they have to fix the entire world by forcing it to conform to their personal limitations. It doesn't matter if it's your partner making rules about your glass of wine or a theologian defining sin for millions, the underlying psychological move is exactly the same.
So it's crucial to remember, the goal here isn't healing. It isn't about support or creating a safe space. The real goal is domination. It's about suppressing and controlling everything on the outside because they can't control what's going on inside. Every time they control you, they get a temporary, powerful hit of feeling like they're finally in control of themselves.
And that really leaves us with one big question to chew on. This pattern, it obviously didn't end with St. Augustine, so where do you see it playing out today? What personal struggles, what anxieties or failures are being packaged up and sold to the rest of us as universal truths we all have to live by? Once you start looking for it, you'll see it everywhere. It's a powerful new lens to see the world through. Thanks for joining me.